Spring 1945, Fürfeld, Germany. The warm April breeze carried the distant rumble of American artillery as Helga Schmidt, 22, Nachrichtenhelferin of the Wehrmacht Signal Corps, stared at the approaching American soldiers. After years of propaganda describing Americans as brutal savages who mutilated prisoners, the young woman clutched her official identification papers with trembling hands. Her heart pounded beneath her grey uniform blouse as she prepared for the worst, having heard Goebbels' warnings about the special horrors awaiting female auxiliaries. The American lieutenant approached, tall and alien in his olive-drab uniform. "Sprechen Sie English?" he asked, his voice lacking the harshness Helga expected. When she shook her head, he motioned to a German-speaking soldier who explained she would be transported to a collection point for processing. No handcuffs were applied, no weapons pointed at her head. They offered her a canteen of water and a K-ration biscuit. This moment of unexpected civility, repeated thousands of times across Germany in spring 1945, represented the first crack in the ideological fortress built by Nazi propaganda. Military records from the US Army's 3rd Infantry Division document 147 female auxiliaries captured that week alone in the Rhineland region, each experiencing similar disorienting encounters with American professionalism. Since 1940, approximately 450,000 German women had served as Helferinnen, auxiliary personnel supporting the Wehrmacht's communications, air defense, and administrative operations. They operated switchboards, decoded messages, tracked Allied aircraft, and maintained the bureaucratic machinery of the Nazi war effort. By 1945, with Germany collapsing, approximately 10,000 would fall into American hands. Nazi leadership had prepared these women for capture with specific instructions: destroy sensitive documents, maintain discipline, expect torture, and prepare for sexual violence. Training manuals recovered from a Signals Battalion headquarters detailed recommended responses to American interrogation, including prepared false information. Female auxiliaries received special briefings emphasizing the barbaric nature of American troops toward German women. The reality proved shockingly different. US Army processing records from April 1945 show standardized procedures for female military personnel: separate transport from male prisoners, female military police escorts when available, dedicated processing lines, and specialized accommodation areas. The systematic respect shown to these women wasn't accidental, but reflected deliberate American military policy. At the Fürstenfeldbruck collection point, Helga joined 43 other female auxiliaries in a former school gymnasium. They received army blankets, basic toiletry kits containing soap and toothbrushes, and hot meals served on metal trays, 3,200 calories including canned meat, bread, and fruit cocktail. According to quartermaster records, these women received identical rations to American WAC personnel. That night, lying on a cot with a clean blanket, a full stomach, and without experiencing any of the horrors Nazi propaganda had promised, Helga wrote in her diary, "The Americans treat us with a respect we no longer received even in Germany. I cannot reconcile what I was told with what I have experienced today." This entry, later preserved in military archives, captures the beginning of a profound transformation. These women, raised under National Socialism and dedicated to the fatherland, would discover that their first night in enemy hands revealed a fundamental truth about democracy that would entirely remake their understanding of the world. Military transport trucks rumbled westward across the Rhine in late April 1945, carrying female Wehrmacht auxiliaries toward processing centers in France and Belgium. Unlike civilians in territories Germany had conquered, crammed into cattle cars without food or water, these German women traveled in standard military transport with bench seating, regular rest stops, and military rations. According to transport manifests from the 7th Army, each vehicle carried 16 to 20 women with 2 WAC military police escorts, maintaining 70% of standard capacity to ensure adequate space. At the Reims processing center, US Army medical personnel conducted intake examinations with unexpected thoroughness. Dr. Eleanor Grantham, a captain in the Army Medical Corps, documented in her May 1945 reports that 68% of incoming female auxiliaries showed signs of malnutrition, with average weight 11.3 kilograms below standard. Dental examinations revealed widespread vitamin deficiencies, with 74% requiring immediate treatment. These women, who had served the Reich's military apparatus, were receiving more comprehensive medical care from their captors than they had from their own nation in the war's final years. Processing procedures followed standardized protocols. Each woman received a numbered identification card, a complete change of clothing including undergarments, 2 sets of standard-issue coveralls, toiletry kits with feminine hygiene products, and medical treatment as needed. Military quartermasters issued new items still in manufacturing packaging, not cast-offs or donations. The contrast with the Reich's treatment of foreign female prisoners, who received no such considerations. Official documentation categorized these women as auxiliary military personnel, rather than civilians, an important distinction ensuring proper treatment under Geneva Convention standards. Quartermaster records from May through September 1945 show the US military processed 9,873 female German auxiliaries, with over 7,000 passing through just 3 centers: Reims, France, Frankfurt, Germany, and Antwerp, Belgium. Each facility allocated separate women's sections with female military personnel present whenever possible. The accommodations presented yet another shock. Former Nachrichtenhelferin Inge Müller described in a 1976 interview her first night at the Frankfurt Processing Center. They gave us iron cots with real mattresses, clean sheets that smelled of laundry soap, wool blankets, and actual pillows. The floors were swept daily. The windows had curtains. We had access to hot water and proper toilets, luxuries unavailable even in Berlin by war's end. Processing center supply records confirm these amenities, showing weekly requisitions for laundry soap, 227 kilograms per facility, toilet paper, 350 rolls, and disinfectant, 190 liters. Initial letters home, censored but preserved in military intelligence files, reveal consistent themes of surprise. Hilda Becker wrote to her mother in Munich, "Dearest mother, you must not worry about me. I have regular meals, medical care, and safe shelter. The Americans are strict but correct. We receive 3 meals daily with portions larger than what we had in the Signal Corps." These letters, when delivered to German civilians facing severe food shortages under occupation, created cognitive dissonance. Women who had pledged themselves to the fatherland service found themselves receiving better treatment from the enemy than German civilians experienced from their own collapsed government. Military police records document remarkably few disciplinary incidents. Captain Ruth Miller, WAC commander at Reims, reported, "The German women auxiliaries maintain excellent order and cooperate fully with regulations." Their surprise at humane treatment appears to be generating substantial goodwill. This observation would prove prophetic, as women who expected to demonstrate their devotion to the Reich through suffering discovered themselves treated with unexpected dignity by the very enemy they had been taught to fear. Life in American detention camps established a daily rhythm that emphasized normalcy and dignity. Reveille sounded at 0600 hours, followed by breakfast at 0700, work assignments from 0800 to 1200, lunch break until 1300, afternoon duties until 1700, evening meal at 1800, and recreational time until lights out at 2200. This schedule, documented in camp administrative records, provided structure while allowing personal time, a sharp contrast to the grueling, unpredictable schedules these women endured during the war's final chaotic months. Housing for female auxiliaries exceeded wartime German civilian standards. At Camp Forest, Tennessee, women occupied former officer quarters, single-story wooden structures with proper insulation, electrical lighting, and central heating. Each barracks housed 24 women with individual beds spaced 1.2 meters apart, personal footlockers, and shared washroom facilities with hot running water. Military engineering reports indicate these accommodations provided 5.8 square meters of personal space per detainee, compared to the 2.3 square meters allocated to German civilians in emergency housing during the same period. The nutritional contrast proved even more striking. Daily rations at detention camps averaged 3,400 calories per person, including meat portions, 170 grams, dairy products, vegetables, fruit, bread, 340 grams, and coffee with real sugar. Meanwhile, German civilians in the American occupation zone received approximately 1,500 calories daily, with meat limited to 100 grams weekly when available. Camp menus preserved in quartermaster records show regular servings of eggs, milk, and fresh vegetables, items that had disappeared from German civilian diets years earlier. Personal hygiene supplies, nearly unobtainable in Germany since 1943, became routine in American camps. Each woman received monthly 2 bars of soap, 1 tube of toothpaste, 1 toothbrush, shampoo, and necessary feminine hygiene products. Camp supply records document these allocations as standard issue, not luxuries. Former auxiliary Margarete Weber recalled in a 1985 interview, "Having sanitary napkins again after years of using newspapers and rags, this small dignity restored something the war had taken from us." Medical attention included weekly sick call, monthly checkups, dental care, and access to female medical staff when possible. Camp infirmary records from Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, show 97% of German female detainees received dental treatment during their detention, addressing years of neglected care. Psychological support, though limited by today's standards, exceeded anything available to German civilians, with chaplains and Red Cross representatives providing regular counseling. Recreational opportunities included outdoor exercise periods, library access with German language books, and craft supplies. Educational offerings featured English language classes, basic American history, and current events discussions using newspapers and radio broadcasts. Cultural activities emerged as detainees organized their own theatrical performances, choral groups, and holiday celebrations. Religious accommodations included weekly Protestant and Catholic services, with chaplains providing German language worship materials and counseling. The cumulative effect of these conditions, adequate food, medical care, sanitation, education, and activities, created an environment that contrasted sharply with conditions in defeated Germany. In a letter intercepted by camp censors in August 1945, former Luftwaffenhelferin Gerda Schmidt wrote to her sister in Berlin, "If this is how Americans treat their enemies, imagine how they must treat their friends. I have gained 6 kilograms and no longer wake from hunger pains. The Americans feed us better than our own leaders fed us when we served the fatherland. I have come to believe we were fighting not against monsters, as they told us, but against a paradise on earth." Work assignments within American detention facilities provided unexpected vocational opportunities for German female auxiliaries. Camp administrators, facing personnel shortages, assigned women to roles matching their military specializations. At Fort Oglethorpe, former Signal Corps operators maintained camp telephone systems. At Camp Shanks, women with administrative experience staffed typing pools, producing the very documentation of their detention. According to Army labor utilization records, detained women worked an average of 32 hours weekly, earning scrip worth approximately $18 monthly for canteen purchases, tangible recognition of their contributions. This employment exposed these women to American organizational systems fundamentally different from Nazi hierarchies. Elfriede Scholz, who had served as a filing clerk for the Wehrmacht, noted in a 1978 oral history, "I was asked for suggestions to improve the filing system. When I hesitantly offered an idea, it was implemented the next day. This never happened in Germany, where questioning procedures meant punishment." Camp administration logs reveal numerous instances of procedural changes attributed to detainee recommendations, demonstrating a flexibility alien to the rigid Nazi bureaucracy these women had served. The absence of Nazi social control created cognitive space for independent thought. Women who had lived under constant ideological surveillance suddenly existed without swastikas, Hitler portraits, or mandatory political assemblies. Camp security reports document the rapid disappearance of Nazi formalities and salutes among female detainees, replaced by American-style greetings within weeks. At Camp Forest, Tennessee, intelligence officers noted that women initially reluctant to criticize the regime began openly discussing Nazi failures by June 1945. Access to uncensored information accelerated this transformation. Camp libraries stocked with American newspapers and magazines revealed a world beyond Goebbels' propaganda. Radio rooms broadcasting armed forces network exposed women to news of concentration camp liberations, war crimes trials, and German civilian conditions. Intelligence officer reports from Camp Forest documented that 83% of female auxiliaries initially denied knowledge of concentration camps, But after 3 months of American news access, 91% acknowledged awareness of atrocities. Physical recovery provided visible evidence contradicting Nazi claims of American barbarism. Medical records from Fort Oglethorpe show female detainees gained an average of 4.2 kilograms during their first 3 months in custody. Dental treatment completion rates reached 97%, addressing years of neglected care. Army doctors documented cases like that of Helene Fisher, a former flak helferin who arrived with severe malnutrition in May 1945 and by September had regained 9.7 kilograms and recovered from 3 vitamin deficiency disorders. This physical improvement contrasted dramatically with deteriorating conditions for German civilians. Red Cross reports from summer 1945 estimated average daily civilian caloric intake at 1,050 in Berlin and 1,200 in Munich. While women in detention received 3 meals daily totaling 3,400 calories, their families at home wrote of grinding hunger. One letter to Ingrid Müller at Camp Shanks, preserved in Army intelligence files, stated, "We rejoice that you at least are well fed. Your brother received only 600 grams of bread this week for the entire family." Communication freedoms further distinguish captivity from Nazi Germany. Detainees could send 2 censored letters weekly, more correspondence than many had been permitted during military service. The censorship itself proved lighter than expected, with Army intelligence focusing primarily on security concerns rather than political expression. Traditional gender restrictions simultaneously loosened. Women who had served in rigidly defined auxiliary roles found themselves in a military culture that, while not egalitarian by modern standards, permitted greater female autonomy than Nazi ideology allowed. Former Nachrichtenhelferin Ursula Koenig recalled, "American female soldiers drove trucks, gave orders to men, and moved with confidence I had never seen in German women." This observation of alternative gender possibilities planted seeds of profound social reconsideration. By autumn 1945, these women had experienced a paradoxical truth, that they had found greater personal freedom as prisoners than as servants of the Third Reich. Daily exposure to American democratic processes created subtle but profound reorientations among the detained women. Camp councils elected by detainees handled minor disputes and coordinated with American authorities, demonstrating practical democracy rather than theoretical concepts. At Camp Shanks, voting records show 94% participation in barracks representative elections by August 1945. Women who had never experienced meaningful voting now engaged in regular democratic decision-making. This participation extended to mess committee elections, entertainment planning, and work assignment preferences. Interactions with American female personnel revealed alternatives to Nazi gender ideology. Women's Army Corps members supervised many camp operations, modeling professional autonomy unimaginable under National Socialism. Captain Margaret Wilson, WAC detachment commander at Fort Oglethorpe, regularly consulted with German senior auxiliaries on camp improvements, demonstrating collaborative leadership rather than rigid hierarchy. Former Luftwaffenhelferin Johanna Becker noted in her memoirs, "The American women officers spoke to male officers as equals. They drove vehicles, gave orders, made decisions. This quiet revolution in how women could exist in the world affected us more deeply than any lecture about democracy." Leadership styles within the camps provided daily contrast between democratic and authoritarian approaches. American officers explained rules rather than demanding blind obedience, requested feedback on policies, and modified procedures based on practical outcomes rather than ideological purity. Camp discipline reports show declining rule violations throughout 1945, with infractions dropping 64% between May and December. Major Thomas Wilkinson, camp commander at Fort Oglethorpe, attributed this trend to growing buy-in to a system that treats detainees as reasoning adults rather than subjects to be commanded. Information access accelerated ideological transformation. Camp libraries received weekly newspaper shipments, including Stars and Stripes, American regional papers, and German-language publications produced in the American zone. Radio rooms with scheduled broadcast access provided war crimes trial coverage, news from occupied Germany, and American entertainment programming. By September 1945, camp authorities at Fort Oglethorpe had logged 3,247 German-language books borrowed by female detainees, with histories of America and democratic political theory among the most requested titles. Film screenings delivered particularly powerful impacts. Documentary footage from concentration camp liberations, shown in October 1945, elicited profound responses. Military intelligence officers documented reactions ranging from disbelief to horror to shame. One report quoted Ingrid Mueller, former Signals Auxiliary. "We were told Americans fabricated atrocity stories. Now I have seen evidence with my own eyes. What else did they lie to us about?" American newsreels showing thriving civilian life contradicted years of propaganda about America's supposed weakness and deprivation. Facilitated discussion groups emerged spontaneously, then received official support. At Camp Shanks, detainee Margareta Weber, a former university student before joining the Wehrmacht Auxiliary, led weekly conversations on democratic principles, attended by 37 women on average. Military intelligence observers noted these discussions evolved from skeptical questioning to genuine intellectual engagement with concepts of individual rights, limited government, and rule of law. Correspondence with family in Germany provided sobering perspective on conditions under occupation. Letters received by detainees described food shortages, housing crises, and infrastructure collapse. This correspondence, partially preserved in military archives, reveals growing awareness among the women that they enjoyed better conditions in American custody than their civilian counterparts experienced in defeated Germany. The most profound transformations occurred as women confronted Nazi crimes. Army psychologist Captain Robert Abrams documented this process in a December 1945 report. Initial denial gives way to cognitive dissonance, then to anger at being deceived, and finally to a fundamental re-evaluation of values and beliefs. This progression occurs most effectively not through formal re-education, but through the lived experience of humane treatment that contradicts everything they were taught to expect from us. The women who discover America's true nature through daily interactions become more effective advocates for democratic values than any we could deliberately create through propaganda. Repatriation began in stages throughout 1946, with American authorities carefully preparing German women auxiliaries for return to a homeland transformed by defeat and occupation. Pre-release orientation included practical briefings on conditions in occupied Germany, employment opportunities with occupation authorities, and documentation of their work experience in detention. Each woman received a certification of good conduct, crucial for employment under denazification regulations. Military records show 8,743 female auxiliaries repatriated between January and December 1946, with detailed processing at transition centers in Bremen, Frankfurt, and Munich. The physical contrast upon return created immediate visual testimony to American treatment. Former Nachrichtenhelferin Greta Hoffmann, photographed at both intake in May 1945 and release in April 1946, had gained 12.3 kilograms and showed complete recovery from malnutrition. Military doctors documented similar patterns across repatriated women, whose healthy appearance stood in stark contrast to the gaunt civilians who greeted them. These women returned with possessions unimaginable to Germans who had endured the occupation winter. New clothing, hygiene supplies, and food packages provided as departure allowances. Each departing detainee received a £10 parcel containing coffee, sugar, canned meat, chocolate, and cigarettes, items that functioned as currency in Germany's desperate post-war economy. Knowledge transfer flowed from returned auxiliaries into German society. Women who had worked in American clerical systems brought organizational techniques to German businesses and occupation offices. Those trained in American food preparation methods introduced new approaches to resource management in a time of extreme scarcity. Military government employment records from 1947 show 2,318 former female auxiliaries hired as typists, translators, switchboard operators, and administrative assistants in occupation offices, valued for their familiarity with American procedures and terminology. Influence extended beyond professional spheres into family networks. Ilse Brauer, who had served as a telephone operator before capture, described in a 1978 interview how her American detention experience affected her parenting. "I raised my daughters with less emphasis on obedience and more on thinking independently. I had seen where blind obedience led Germany, and I'd witnessed an alternative approach during my time in America. This pattern of changed parenting approaches appears repeatedly in post-war interviews with former auxiliaries. Emigration statistics reveal another dimension of impact. By 1952, approximately 3,200 former Wehrmacht female auxiliaries had applied for American immigration, with 1,873 successfully relocating to the United States. Their applications, preserved in immigration records, frequently cited positive detention experiences as motivation. Former Flakhelferin Herta Möller wrote in her 1951 application, "I witnessed American values firsthand during my detention. I wish to build my future in a society founded on those principles rather than the authoritarianism that brought my homeland to ruin." Marriage records from occupation years show 914 former female auxiliaries married American personnel between 1947 and 1952. These detention romances often began when former detainees secured employment with occupation authorities and reconnected with American personnel they had met during captivity. Each union represented a profound personal referendum on competing systems and values. Interviews conducted decades later consistently emphasized the detention period as transformative. In a 1985 documentary, former Nachrichtenhelferin Ursula Werther stated, "Those months in American custody completely changed my worldview. I arrived believing Americans were our enemies and inferiors. I left understanding they represented a superior way of organizing society. Not through force and fear, but through abundance and opportunity." Everything I'd been taught about America was a lie, and discovering this truth shaped my entire life afterward. The historical significance extends beyond individual experiences. Professor Richard Faulkner, whose 2012 study examined the German female auxiliary experience, concluded, "These women became unofficial ambassadors for democratic values during Germany's critical Reconstruction period. Their first-hand experiences of American fairness, even toward enemies, made them particularly credible advocates during Germany's democratic transition." The transformation came full circle in 1976, when former Nachrichtenhelferin Ingrid Schmidt, by then a schoolteacher in Munich, told an interviewer, "The Reich promised us glory through harshness and hatred. In American hands, we discovered something unexpected, that true strength comes through fairness and humanity. One American guard's simple kindness accomplished what 1,000 propaganda speeches could not. He offered me a chocolate bar when I was hungry, without expecting anything in return. That moment of unexpected decency from an enemy destroyed everything the Reich had built in my mind over years. Sometimes, I think Germany's redemption began with such small moments of kindness toward those who expected only cruelty."